to be reburied in Israel. And this was one of them. He was being reburied here. And when I came home from the funeral, there was a letter from your father telling me that my mother had died.
Wow.
So I had been to a funeral. I don't know, it's just weird, but that's what happened.
What were your years at Maga Michael like?
They were very good, they were very nice. I was there almost 4 years. I went there as a hired English teacher and I didn't like it, so I stayed on I was a metapelet in a pouton, the children were 1.5 years, and I stayed with them until they're 3. Everything is ideology, they drove me crazy with their ideology. And then I realized a kibbutz is very family oriented. I have nothing against the kibbutz. They paid me whatever they had to pay me. It was a very wealthy kibbutz too. I was treated very well and there was no problem. And I wanted to go and study special ed and they wouldn't do it, and they were right, because they have to give their own members priority. So I left and I applied to three cities, and wherever I would get work, that's where I would live. So I wound up in Tel Aviv, which in retrospect was the best thing that could have happened to me. The rest is history.
How old were you when you ended up in Tel Aviv for the first time?
I must have been in my 40s, I think. I don't know.
You've been there ever since?
Eh?
You've been there ever since?
Yeah, I visited. They're extremely, I told you, they have in the Chader Ochel, and I spoke to someone, they said, well, no, it's rented out. They don't, it's catered. They have Chinese food, Chinese people with a thing around their head serving you. When I was there, we all worked there, and the Chaverim would hand out the food. They don't know, no, they have now Chinese people hand you get Chinese food, you want Indonesian food, it's unbelievable. And then there was someone there, an American woman. She didn't recognize me, I didn't recognize her either. I recognized her voice. And she was saying, 60 years old is the best age to be in the kibbutz because I get to see my son once a week in Beersheba. And then we visited someone who has a lovely apartment, and someone comes in once a week to clean. Her apartment is bigger than the one I have, and they have everything. It's a very wealthy kibbutz, and money-wise, and you have really no existential worries where you're going to eat, what you're going to wear. That is taken care of. But it's not fair to lack us. I'm not there, so I don't know. But that leaves something very empty, because it's not enough.
Devora,
The first thing you do is worry about how you're going to pay the rent and things like that, which is very important. But it's not enough.
when you were working in the children's house, you mentioned the ideology used to drive you crazy. Can you give me an example of what you mean?
Well, look, at the age of 3, you had to leave the pouton, the toddler's house, and go into the kindergarten. Because at that age, there's something there, and in the pouton, there were 2 groups, and it had to be that way because of ideology. Because there had to be the older group, the older children, and the younger children, so that they could learn one from each other.
It was very regimented.
And by God, Michael, and there was one kid, and in grade 12, he wanted to be a doctor. Can you imagine that tragedy? Because everybody had to be a chalutz. And if you I'm sure because Magan Michael was the kind of kibbutz that always went halfway, if not more, towards the individual. So I'm sure they allowed him to study medicine.
Do you think the children who grew up in that environment where you were teaching, do you think they grew up with emotional problems?
Everybody has emotional problems. They also have, look, the important thing was they wanted to break the bad influence of parents on children. So everybody was their mother, like I was their mother. I resented that because I wasn't their mother, and at night I didn't feel like getting up in let the real mother go and tend to the child. If there's no, some children had problems. Very few, but there were here and there was a child that needed some in the middle of the night or whatever.
So in the middle of the night, if a child needed comforting, it was not the mother that they called.
No, because there was the shomer. They had a shomer. You had to have shmirah, guarding the camps because of the Arabs. So you had, and they would look in on the children's houses. So they made their rounds, whatever they had to do, and they would look in on the children's houses too. And once there was such a thunderstorm, I thought I must have been I must have slept very deeply, because when I woke up, I thought it was the end of the world. It took me like a few minutes to come down to earth. It was a tremendous storm, and I just couldn't get up. There was one woman, she got up and she didn't go to where her child was. She went to her, the group that she was looking after, but she didn't go to where her child was. And once I had to take one of my children to the doctor to see if he was allergic to penicillin. So I'm holding him in my arms, the penicillin, and I'm waiting in line at the infirmary, and the child's mother comes with a child from her puton in her arms, and she stands next to me, and I say to her, do you want to take him? So she says, no, what'll I do with it? Because the child she was holding didn't know me. But what was the wonder of it to me was the child didn't even ask to go to his mother. And I say, when they come from the hospital, they already know what's in store for them. I still can't get over it how he never asked to go, and it was a pizza, a year and a half.
When I interviewed Simcha and Dahlia 2 years ago, and her son was conducting the interview, all he wanted to know was about what you're talking about, what it was like for her as a mother to not be able to be with her children.
Well,
and she said it was difficult, but it was just everyone did it. That was what they did.
That was it. That was the ideology. Everything was ideology.
And then one day it all changed.
Not one day.
So how did it
change?
Do you remember when it changed? Like what was going on?
I was out of the kibbutz. It had to change. But if it hadn't been for the kibbutz,
I think we're done that subject. Rafaela, why don't you take us in a new direction?
Okay.
the moon.
Are we filming? Because we're on. Okay. What do you miss most about your childhood?
Nothing.
Nothing?
Thank you.
Not one thing?
Mm.
Do you have any fond memories of being a child?
One or two, but it was very painful, and I try not to think about it. You know, you've got to go forward.
When you were younger, did you look up to anyone?
I don't think so.
Can I interject here? What you're talking about right now, do you think that was typical of the period of children of immigrants? It was a painful childhood. Do you
I think so. Because it was very difficult for the pair. They didn't know the language, and you had to make a living. Food, just putting food on the table. And there was no technology. You had to do everything yourself. It was very difficult for everyone. Apparently I was luckier than a lot of other people when you see how some of them turned out. But it was a very difficult period. And people in Israel, my mother had a sister, send us this and that. They thought we were millionaires. They didn't know that we didn't have, that we also had to work hard.
But
It was a very difficult period all over the world at the time.
But what's so interesting to me is that later, when you describe what it was like to live on a kibbutz and all those needs were handled and taken care of, you also felt a sense of there's something missing.
Well, look, at the time, you have so many adjusting that I told them I want to study Hebrew. And so, it's important. And then I said to them, if you're not going to send me, there was a course being given somewhere in Haifa or whatever, I'm going to take it on my own. And they were so impressed. They couldn't believe I would pay or I would. So they sent me, I was able to.
How did you come to Maga Michael?
I was an Eina Shofet doing an Ulpan. And they know each other. And Eina Shofet is not that far from Maga Michael. That they were looking for an English teacher. So they told me and I applied and I got it.
So in other words, just to go back to my point, I think the point I'm trying to make is that as difficult as conditions were when you were growing up in Montreal, and that you had to worry about putting food on the table, etc., at least you also had free will. You could make your own decisions about what you wanted to do if you could afford to do them. Whereas on the kibbutz, even though they took care of your most basic needs, they also governed your.
Look, in the kibbutz, I wasn't subject to those rules because I wasn't a member. But if you wanted to, when I said I'm leaving, someone said to me, Devora, don't leave. Because then maybe next year you'll get a refrigerator. And then someone said, 8 years from now you'll get a trip. So I said, what if I don't live that long? So I had to leave. I was just being stifled. And it's very family oriented. And when I went back and saw the wealth, it's unbelievable. It took me a day to come down to earth. And I said to myself, thank God I left. And a lot of people who are anti-kibbutz, I don't know whether they're right or not, but they said, they take away the new yozma. You know what yozma is? Initiative. If you have to get up at 5 o'clock in the morning or whatever, someone comes to wake you. You don't even have to do that on your own. But look, the story of the kibbutz is really a remarkable story. And I personally think that without the kibbutz, there would be no Israel. The conditions were unbelievably difficult. The obstacles, not only because of the Arabs. A lot of people came and left because they had nothing to eat. Ben Gurion came at one time and then went back and he came back again. And apparently because they just didn't have food to eat. And you couldn't do it as an individual, but a group. Plus, they had and without an ideology, you can't do anything either. You're going to reshape the world. You're going to set up a new society of justice and equality. That's the kibbutz was based on that, and women worked like men. Equality, but.
There are pros and cons, like everything else.
Nothing is, it's not normal. I was told the story of one woman who was in the baby house, the children's house, the puton, that is, every day, because when she gave birth to her child, she didn't have milk and they wouldn't let her see her baby. So when she had her grandchild, she was there all the time. It's something inhuman. But Israel is one big miracle. I think it's more than one big miracle. But without the kibbutz, the hardships were unbelievable, the obstacles, it freed the women from looking after children. But they didn't put in the right people with the children. Because what does a little one need? And I know someone, she's in her 70s, when she talks about, she was born here, and when she talks about her early childhood, she starts to cry. She still cries of the mitapelet that used to hit her, and because what do you need children? It's you need someone who can work and.
It flies in everything we know about attachment.
What did you say?
I said it flies in everything we know about attachment and what children need.
There's many memoirs of children who grew up on a kibbutz talking about the emotional, psychological damage.
And they did it also to free, so that children, when they grow up, they wouldn't have the inhibitions that they had. And in the Shomer Hatzair, their extreme left, they forced boys and girls to shower together, etc., until they, even after they were 18, and it's not, and they don't like. At a certain age, they separate by themselves.
Right.
And they were also trying to create a new human being, a sabra, and they really succeeded, because
They would have been I wasn't like my parents.
But
You
what I'm
weren't
saying,
like your
the
parents.
sabra mentality is someone who's very hard on the outside and
And so,
doesn't.
no beseder.
But that's what they wanted to create.
Well, they needed it also. So you have they're outspoken, and the thing was to be dugri, like stick a knife inside you, tell you the truth, which is very, you have to be careful with the truth. But everything was different, and life was much simpler. Everything is complicated now. It's not as simple as it used to be.
Do you remember in those days, Devora, that the people were looking to the Soviet Union for their ideology and rejecting?
I wasn't here then. There was a split. Husband and wife divorced. Children broke away from their parents because there were those that were pro-Russia and those that were anti-Russia.
Where was this, in the 50s?
Something like that. I wasn't here.
When they started finding out what Stalin was doing, that's when there was the split.
Look, I knew. If you wanted to know, you knew. I knew. I was a youngster. I had to choose. When I heard they're persecuting Jews, I didn't want to have anything to do with that. With the great, save the world. But the kibbutz seemed split apart.
Because the kibbutz came from this collective ideology that its origin was in the Soviet Union. Collectivist.
Probably, yes, of communism and saving the world. But they came here to save it, which they did. They did save Israel at a terrible cost. But I think they got together again. I don't know. I just heard about it when I came, because it was already history. But look, passions run very high here. Can you imagine husband and wife divorcing, children severing ties with their parents because of that? The kibbutz, there was one kibbutz or more than one that split. They went off here, and everyone needed the same thing. I tell you, it's a good thing there are Arabs here. I think there was a civil war. I personally think that there was a civil war here in Israel at the beginning, with Mapai and Begin and the Likud, and they both wanted the same thing. It's interesting.
Okay, I'm sorry I took it away from Rafaela. Where's your next question?
Rafael is a ganze Megillah.
What's that mean?
A whole story.
Oh yeah.
Means you're doing well. Keep going.
Okay.
Hurry up.
Have you ever experienced shame?
All the time.
What was
I grew up that way. That's my mother's main way of educating us.
Do you want to say more about that?
Hmm?
Do you want to elaborate on what you just said?
I remember when 4 or 5, little one, you got shame, shame, shame. That's what we learned from my mother. She was like, but she grew up that way.
Shame, like what did you do?
Whatever if you didn't drink, my main crime was I didn't drink milk.
And what would she do if you didn't drink milk?
No, I'm
Same
just
thing.
saying.
Oh.
Whatever you did, it was shame, shame, shame. They didn't know
It's
any
the opposite
better.
of how we raise children today,
Mm.
which is also messed up.
What?
It's the opposite of how we raise children today,
I
which
know
is
that.
also messed up because today your child
There's
can do no
overboard
wrong.
the other way.
There's a difference
It's too
though
extreme.
between shame and
No,
doing
I
no
know,
wrong.
but
One
people of our
extreme is just as
generation-
bad as the other one.
Yeah.
It's very dangerous. I mean, the way children were treated in the not only in Cheder where with the whip, the caning, and the other. So now teachers are afraid of students. That's just as destructive.
So
That you can go and hit a teacher. Ever heard of such a thing?
No.
It's very destructive.
Okay, move on, Raphael.
Yeah, like to the end.
What? No, I have so many more questions. What smell always brings you comfort?
It's a great question.
Where does she come up with? Listen, I'm not from the moon.
Did you go to university to learn this line of questioning?
That is a great question.
Really, for whom?
It actually has to do with neurobiology.
Oh,
Oh,
To do with what?
Who knew?
Neurobiology.
Who knew she was an expert?
guys, just wait. Anything?
Israel brings me if something good is Israel does something good or great or whatever. I take a lot of pride and pleasure. And,
It's accomplishments.
yeah.
What makes you feel like your best self?
Oh, I know Batman.
You really thought that was land
I'm not answering such stupid stupidities.
Devora, it's not stupidity. It's just you don't want to have to answer it. It's not stupidity.
My best self.
Hey, Raphael, you gotta know your subject. Yeah, keep going, Raphael. This is entertaining.
Just let that just wash over you. Honey. Don't take it personally.
Oh my god, of course not. Okay, so
Tell
I'm
me, your generation talks that way.
Yeah, they do.
Best self. What the hell?
What about your worst self?
Do you believe that people deserve second chances?
Yeah, I think so. Why not?
Have you ever been in trouble with the law?
No. What would I do?
I don't know. You never know. I've lived 90 years to war. Anything could happen. I'm afraid to ask you any of these questions.
Yeah.
No, we're having fun. Ask.
She'll only bite your head off. It's the worst that could happen here.
Okay. Where's your most favorite place you've ever traveled?
I don't know. The desert, I think.
Where's the worst place you've ever traveled? What?
I had no worst place.
You've never had a bad experience traveling?
Don't think so, no. I haven't traveled that much.
Okay.
Didn't fall off a cliff.
You didn't like going to Vienna.
Yeah, I didn't like Vienna.
Why not?
See?
I don't know, I just didn't like anything about it. And you know, the strange thing was, I was afraid when we were making it to come to Hungary, because there was so much news here in Israel about Hungary and anti-Semitism, and I was really scared to come. And when Laurie and he and I took the train to Vienna, but Wendy stayed on.
No, we drove the car to Vienna. When we got to Vienna, you and I couldn't stay there. We couldn't handle it. And we took the train.
And he and I took the train. And the minute I landed, I got off the train, in the train station, I fell in love with Hungary. It was, you don't know these things. And there was a big sign in Vienna. And Vienna's beautiful. It's so wide, it's unbelievable. Coming from Israel, you have like 10, you have a two-way street cars and
Sidewalks?
but not sidewalks.
Streetcars.
Avenues? Right.
bicycle lanes.
Oh, okay.
Bicycle lanes. You get off the bus, you land right inside a bicycle lane to get onto the other side. I mean, everything is so narrow, and there everything is so wide. It must be like a mile wide, the streets. Did you notice that?
I wasn't in Vienna. I wasn't with you.
Oh, you never went to Vienna?
No, I haven't been there.
And we even had coffee. There's a big sign, Freud had coffee here. Big deal. We went in and we had coffee. I didn't feel a thing. He didn't inspire me or anything like that. But I didn't like Vienna.
See?
And Laurie felt even worse. So, and Wendy stayed to see an exhibit. Who stayed with you? I forget.
Becca.
But the minute I landed, I got off the train. And one thing right away, we were from Vienna to Hungary. We were in Hungary right away, an hour or something. Then I realized, because when the war was on, Hitler was marching in one country. I realized how in one day he could get into